ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and welcome the moderator, Geysha González.
Hello. Hello, hello. Hello, everyone. Hi. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us. I am Geysha González, and I am the Senior Vice President at the Center for European Policy Analysis, or CEPA. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all, especially those that are just coming in, to our conversation on the metaverse, safe space. Of course, the metaverse is a very nascent subject, and I'm delighted that we are having a conversation on emerging technology that is not just about AI. And so with that, we're going to talk about the opportunities, challenges, and what we can do to work together in government, civil society, and the private sector to ensure that we have a safe, beneficial metaverse. And so with that, I am delighted to welcome our speakers, Mehwish, Ansari, Melissa Hathaway, Andrzej, Horoch, and Jakub Turowski. So with that, please welcome. And a kind reminder to our audience that as we're doing our Q&A, please feel free to raise your hand and somebody will come around with a mic. Or you can also enter your questions by using the app, the very effective app. So please, I'll be tracking as we go along, and we look forward to many questions because what the heck is the metaverse? And so with that, I'm going to go to Andrzej first to set the scene for us, and then we can get started.
So listen, I will take you all into the metaverse. Are you ready? I need the audience help. Yeah, are you ready to feel how it is to be in the metaverse? So listen, it will be like a little exercise. I will ask the questions and simply just say yes or no, okay? So, can you see me from the stage? Here,
yes.
Yeah? Can you see my outfit?
Yes.
Perfect. Can you hear my voice coming from the stage?
Yes.
Perfect. Can you recognize how big is this room? Okay. Now will be a tricky one. Can you feel the ground under your feet? Yes. Can you feel that you are sitting on this chair? Well, okay. Now another one. So let's look around at your colleagues. Can you recognize the outfits? Well, okay, and let's shake hands to each other. Really, we are after COVID, so please shake hands of a newer person. Yeah? Don't worry, please be welcome. It's really interesting. It's really important. Yeah. Do you feel the hot or cold the hands are? Yeah. Okay. So now imagine one thing. That you feel all of this and you see all of that, but in the same time you are not here. You are sitting at your home in your favorite armchair, wearing some technology in front of your eyes. So this is a basic vision of metaverse, when we can interact with the digital content in the same way how we discover the world, and how we discover the world with our all senses. And we have technology already existing to be able to achieve this, because thanks to the virtual reality, you can be present in the three-dimensional space. Thanks to haptic technology, you can feel the digital content. And with augmented reality, you are able to see interactive content in our surroundings, like in the real world. So the technology, part of the technology already exists. I heard lately that you can even smell the roses into virtual reality. But I think that it's only the concept. So I think that it's good to understand when trying to find one definition for the metaverse, it's really similar how to find one definition for the word culture. Yeah, because the culture is a very huge concept. And in the same way, you can discuss the metaverse. You can discuss the vision, as I said on the beginning, but the vision are only for the visionaries. You can discuss the technology itself. So how the VR and AR technology will develop in the future. Or you can be solid with concrete example how the individuals and enterprise could benefit from the metaverse. And if we are able to be solid in this, and specific with this example, it will be easy to understand that metaverse is on evolution. Evolution of existing product, just another dimension. So I think for the beginning, it will be that. because it's really hard to define the metaverse. Yeah, it's like, it's
no,
hard.
of course, Andrzej, but thank you for that. It's an interactive session,
Yeah.
interactive conversation. I actually want to kick it over to you, Melissa, because we were talking even backstage about the historical context. Andrzej just took us there, but also mentioned that this is not new. It's the evolution of many things that have come together into this. So why are we having this conversation at GlobeSec? Why are we talking about the metaverse?
Well, because, I mean, the evolution really, it started as a military technology. Augmented reality was military. It was headsets. It was allowed for military training and interactive with the technology, so you could start to anticipate different things. I might disagree with Andrzej. I don't think it actually covers all 5 senses. Da Vinci would tell you, it's like sight, smell, taste, touch, etc. That, it doesn't give you the smell. That's fabricated in your brain, and it's not giving you the taste of what is really here to be having water or coffee. And it really evolved over time. 2009, MIT published Sixth Sense and actually made some of the algorithms more public. And then Google, with the Google glasses, started to actually give you that AR, VR kind of area. Now we're here 15 years later, and it's now starting to become a reality. But the reality is that when you start to look at when we saw social media, and it was just so great, and we started to post everything about ourselves online, and we could connect with families anywhere in the world, and it gave us that connectivity, we saw it as a safe place. And then we saw a few years later of how it was a place to manipulate and deceive and to sell our information and to monetize. And when you think about what's getting ready to happen in the meta, where you have your avatar, and your avatar is kind of you, or maybe it's not you at all, and you're going to actually present whatever it is, the persona that you want to present in this sphere, that we're going to see a manipulation in the meta and in this electronic space that's going to manipulate and deceive at levels that we have not anticipated as society. And so we have to start to think about how we're going to protect ourselves, how we think about data protection, security, resilience of society, how you defend democracy in these areas, from a vulnerability and manipulation. And then we also have to think about how we're going to use it to train, like we did the military in the 90s, how you can use it for new generations of education. Even how you train for telemedicine and different things. There's opportunities with it, but I think it's incumbent upon us to be accountable for addressing the risks head on, because I don't think we've done it responsibly for social media, and we're certainly not doing it for the meta.
Wonderful. Thank you, Melissa, for that. And, I'm going to kick it over to you, Mehwish, because I know Article 19 has done a lot of work advising on the International Telecom Union, which is the UN's agency now to find ways in which we can start thinking about regulation and creating a safe space and the rules of the road in some ways. So I want to talk and pull a little bit on the Melissa comment on, we're seeing some of the challenges. We want to make sure that the folks that are using this, the most vulnerable, are safe, that this is a safe space. So what do you foresee as some of the challenges and some of the things that we can do right now to start safeguarding that?
Sure. Well, it's a great question, and it's a really big one. So I'll try to address this primarily from a human rights perspective, right? Because I don't think we can just talk about security from a national interest perspective. We also need to think about human-centered security. And that really starts with looking at the implications of this technology for privacy, for freedom of expression, for the other rights that we have. And when we think about the metaverse, I think we've already talked a little bit about trying to define it. And what I hear is that it's a consolidation, right? It's a consolidation of platforms, the application of augmented or virtual reality, right? AR, VR, and massive network infrastructures, right? So taking that all together and then thinking about the various use cases that we've heard in the marketing materials for metaverse and its variants, right? It's going to be a place for community spaces, workplaces, meeting venues, places that are, it's going to replace places of worship and religious communities, cultural centers. We're talking about this system as being a proxy for quite a wide variety of both public and private spaces, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the concern here is about just how much data is going to be generated about us, how much data is going to be captured about us, and the ways in which that data collection and processing is going to happen, right? So, there's research now that's, researchers are starting to look at these kinds of technologies, and you're hearing wild numbers, just 20 minutes in an AR VR space generates up to 2 million unique data points about an individual. That's a staggering scale about an individual, right? So really, collectively, what we're talking about is an unprecedented surveillance environment, right? Where data collection is constant, it's involuntary, right? And it's again, in these spaces that we consider both public, but then also intensely private, right? Normally, when we talk about technologies that can be used to enable surveillance, we talk about what the safeguards are in place, right? And we think about the right to privacy and what safeguards we have. And often we talk about data protection, right? And the data protection framework. The problem here is that a lot of the safeguards that we have come to rely on as cornerstones of that data protection framework, they're just not sufficient when we're talking about the kind of surveillance environment that could be defined and developed in these systems when they're rolled out, whatever they look like, right? I think there's also quite a, we're at very initial stages, right, in terms of what the marketed metaverse is actually going to be, right? But when we think about just how much data is being generated about us, consent becomes an issue, right? Consent is a cornerstone of data protection principles, right? You need meaningful, informed consent about collecting any kind of personal data. And there's a lot of personal data that's going to be collected about us, including biometrics, right? But can you meaningfully consent when you don't know how that data is going to be linked to create inferences about you, right? The amount of information that's generated, right? And the way that those data points can be combined to create new information about you is not something we normally think about, right? And even experts have trouble conceptualizing that, right? So when the question, when anonymity no longer becomes a factor, right? When again, even when you try to completely anonymize individuals in these AR, VR spaces, you completely forego the collection of any kind of personal data in the way we currently conceptualize it. The application of machine learning techniques can still re-identify you with 95% accuracy, right? Again, so we're not talking about the fact that these safeguards are irrelevant. What we're saying is that we need to reconsider what personal data means, right? How we're defining that in the context of being able to re-identify individuals and create these inferences, right? We need to think about what it means when we're choosing that contract, right? Especially with decentralized platforms in which all of that data is going to a very small handful of companies.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mehwish. I mean, it was a big question, so thank you. There's so much to unpack there. Before we get to it, I do want to pass it over to Jakub to talk a little bit about, well, Meta, of course, is leading the way in terms of the metaverse. Want to understand how committed is Meta to this, and then addressing some of these challenges that have already been brought up. One, how do we actually place safeguards around our data that is being collected? The question on consent, and when we think about some of the shortcomings of some of the efforts that we've had, how do we actually ensure that the metaverse is a safe space and an inclusive space for those that use it?
Right. So, I guess the first thing to say is that it is really the beginning of a kind of a new generation of the internet, and we are at the beginning of the journey. I kind of often compare where we are with the metaverse today with, I don't know, the TV in the 30s. So it's really, really the kind of first steps. And we always said when we kind of launched this kind of new vision of the metaverse in 21, that it's going to take years, 5-10 years before it becomes really really something that is mainstream. But maybe first remark would be that really when you look at the history of how people communicate online, there's really no revolution here. It is indeed an evolution. It is an evolution that is related to what technology allows us to do, about how we can communicate with each other, and how, to Andrzej's point, how we can be close to each other without being in a same room. Like, it all started with, even social media started with text, because we couldn't allow for more. Then we had pictures, photos, videos, live videos. And then the next step is indeed this kind of Internet 3.0 or more immersive Internet. And here also, I mean, we really don't know where exactly it's going to go. And let's be fair about it. And there's plenty of differences to do between AR and VR. Like VR is really this kind of set that you put on your head, and no one can imagine that we're going to spend like all our days with that, right? But on the contrary, AR.
It'd be funny.
Well, I don't know, but like I'm, however, convinced that long term, like our iPhones will be replaced by some sort of glasses, and this is where the AR kind of part jumps in. So what we're sure is that there is really a huge opportunity for people to communicate in a more immersive way. Now the question is indeed how to do it. And to your point about safety, of course it is a key element. Because, you know, there's plenty of usage of the metaverse that are like, you know, without any issues or without any bigger issues. I'm a huge football fan. Today when I want to watch a football game, I switch on my TV. Tomorrow I'll put on my glasses, I'll be in the stadium. It will be amazing. And there's plenty of examples like that. But most importantly, really what I think is that, you know, with social media, this kind of huge thing, social media, Facebook, was already big when we figured out, damn, maybe there are some problems in terms of data, in terms of privacy, and we only then started thinking, what should we do, how should we regulate and stuff. Here, the great thing is that whereas we are only at the beginning of the journey, we already have these discussions. And that's really a huge difference versus maybe, you know, some, not mistakes, but some things that could have been done better in the Internet 2.0 generation.
Lovely. Thank you for that. I think when we think about, we are at the right time to start having those conversations so that we design in a way that creates the safe space. So we're getting ahead of some of the challenges that we've had before, is what you're saying. So with that in mind, I want to kick it back to Melissa, because I'm thinking, you know, Mehwish has just said, you know, the biometrics, our data, our everything that we do is going to be collected, the idea of consent. There's also, of course, the cyber threats that come with that in the metaverse. So would love to hear from you what you think should be done now, what companies like Meta can be doing now to start safeguarding that space so that the positive pieces that come with the metaverse, the education, the health, actually come through and create a better world.
So I think it's important, a lot of the aspects of this augmented reality is really two things. One, it's depicting a physical place that you think you're at. And then second, it's giving you an emotional environment that you're communicating in. And the emotion is the basis of deception. And so we have to think about, just like we have right now in the internet space of, are you sure you want to go to this website because it doesn't have a signed certificate and we think it's dangerous? You're going to need to have the same type of sentinel in the augmented reality to tell you that danger, the person that you think you're actually interacting with, is not actually who they say they are. And we're also going to have to anticipate the manipulation of that environment for the key messages, or drawing you to a community that is a like-minded community that's going to just continue to reflect the messages that you want to hear, not necessarily a diverse point of view. And that's how the current social media is being manipulated right now, to get you basically be an amplification of channels of information that are akin to what you want to hear. And we're not actually thinking about it as a balanced atmosphere, and we're not thinking about the emotional manipulation and deception that will happen in this augmented reality. And when you start to pair it with artificial intelligence and the ability to create avatars on the fly and other things, I think that would be incumbent upon the tech communities to actually think about it, of how would an intelligence service think about it, how would a military think about it, how are they going to manipulate society, because I think they failed in that aspect in the social media environment.
Wonderful. Thank you, Melissa. Andrzej, back to you. We've identified some of the challenges. We've laid all the cards on the table on that front. Want to hear from you of what you think the metaverse is a positive force, or could be a positive force, when it comes to businesses, to individuals. Are there things that we should be looking forward to?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that I also can follow your statement, because you have a right, you know, it's like about another dimension of challenges, what we already have. because maybe I just run with this and then I can make some example about the positive, but I think it's all positive. We have like a two version of a metaverse what already existing. One is enterprise metaverse. On enterprise level, it's closed ecosystem, so it's much easier. And then we have like open ecosystems, open metaverse, like open platform. The first one, when we discussing about the enterprise level, as an employee, if I put my sign on some kind of regulation of a company, probably it will like it will be the same way how we will use the metaverse itself. Yeah, because we will follow the rules of organization. And of course, there is a good point, but with this technology right now, with the VR technology, we can track somebody's emotion. Yeah, we are able to do it right now. You know, with newest VR headsets, there's a sensor that we can track somebody's emotion, even where they look or face mimics. So it's still, in the matter of the enterprise responsibility, they will be clear that if they take this data or not. Yeah, but it's like a control situation because we control our employees, we know who they are. In the open metaverse, the problem is already existing. Yeah? So because we are creating the internet, so we are able to put everything into internet. We are creating if we want to put some hate or some pleasant things. So it's a responsibility of the platform owners to have the right regulation to track harmful behavior. Yeah? And it's already, they have some tools. Maybe it doesn't work fast as we want to, but yeah, we can track harmful behavior and even remove user from the space. But with AI and with deepfake technology, we have another issue that if right now we just verify the age, or even we are verifying if we are robot or we are human. Right now, there is an issue to verify it, are we a human pretending to be someone else as an avatar? And even if it sounds like vision, we are ready to do this kind of things. It's already existing problem and issue or opportunities when we use in the business. Yes? So I think that it will be another like a layer with the technology to be aware of this. Yes, because you are completely right that it could go all way. So I think that my point of this is the internal regulation of the platform is really important, but equally to education from the early stage. Because I always said, if we are touching the technology right now, it's already too late. It's already too late. Because this technology is old, because the big companies is already working on another iteration of this technology. So we should make a pause and try to build a concrete subject in schools to teach how to be prepared to be present in digital environment, because the problem is right here, right now. Because the influence of the social media into our confidence, our emotion. So I think that it's really important with equally like internal regulation, but the aspect of education, because from my perspective, no one wants to spend money on this. We have beautiful project dedicated to the students to learn about how to be present in the digital space, about the emotion. Yeah, but it's not like for business, yes. It's like business is interested to making money, and I understand this. So I think it's really important to catch this. If I have a time, now I can tell another story about the opportunities, but I don't know if
I might want to come back to you because we do have some questions from folks online, and a reminder that if you do want to ask a question with a mic, just raise your hand and somebody will come to you with a microphone. But I think this speaks, Andrzej, if I may, on one of the questions speaks on what you've just you've just said. One of the questions is, do you think government should be involved in the development of the metaverse, especially when creating a safe environment? I think if we're too late already, some say we're we're ahead than we were when it was social media. How do we balance that, and what role does government have, if any, in actually ensuring that there is a safeguard here? I may go to you first, Jakub, because I think you provide a perspective, and then Mehwish, I'll tie it in with you.
So, first of all, it is already happening. The European Commission launched its first kind of survey, and they are already working on that. So it is happening, and as I said, it is very good that it is happening at a still very early stage of this technology. And then, to me, every new technology should be assessed versus the challenges and the opportunities. And if there are challenges that really become an issue for the societies, then maybe indeed regulations are needed. Now, how to create regulation in a wise way? I guess, as always, it's never about one government, it's not about one institution, it's not about one entity, it's not about Meta, it's about the whole ecosystem to find the right balances so that really we can take the full opportunity of a technology. And on the other hand, because I really fully agree with you with all the potential issues that we have with like this next generation internet, but let's not throw it all away because of the challenges that we may face. Because on the other hand, the opportunities are really, really huge. And when I talk about opportunities, is of course on the business side, on the economic side. We published a report a few weeks ago saying that it's been published hand in hand with Deloitte, and the outcome is that the potential for the European economy is 500 billion till 35. It's really huge. And today, and Andrzej, I'm sure you have much more examples than I do. It is already a reality in B2B, like BMW, Peugeot, Audi. They already create their cars with metaverse related tools. Education is huge. Like, again, today kids are learning history from books, which is great. But like tomorrow, they will put on this meta quest, and they will be in ancient Rome, or like, next to the dinosaurs. It's a completely different experience. So fully appreciating the potential challenges that we face in terms of safety, in terms of privacy. And yes, we have to like kind of deal with that all together. There's also plenty of opportunities that we just shouldn't abandon.
Well, thank you, Jakob. I think there's two questions here. I want to go to Mehwish because I want to talk a little bit about what role should civil society have in these conversations in terms of regulation. I know that they've already kicked off at the ITU and other places. But thinking about this question, there's two questions here on the, how do you classify and prosecute criminal activity online in the metaverse, such as harassment and scams? There's a tie-in question also talking about how do you perceive the dangers of harassment in the metaverse. Of course, we know one of the great issues is gendered, online harassment of, diverse communities. So how do we actually start creating, it's great to have a space where we can, in education, be in ancient Rome, but when it's, trying to be this reality, how do we ensure that some of the challenges that we already have are not replicated?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, I agree with you. With any technology, we need to think about the opportunities and the challenges. But I do want to be really careful here, and I think this is where having a strong evidence base is. I know you asked a lot of questions, Geysha, so I'm going to try to see how well I can answer them all and see how many threads I can pull in one response. But I think when we're talking about opportunities, it's really important that we go into any technology, and this is not just the metaverse, but for any technology, that we really understand in a clear-eyed, evidence-based way what those opportunities and benefits can be. Because there is a lot of technology solutionism, the idea that technology is going to solve offline problems regarding systemic inequalities, right? And education is a great example, but I think what we really need to think about is the research, right? Understanding how well the technology actually can be applied in these environments, the use cases that are being purported for the metaverse, what the benefits actually are, right? And also what the drawbacks are, right? As I said, ubiquitous surveillance environment, right? Is that, thinking about that in the context of schools, for minorities, right, for vulnerable populations, that's a really important question. And we need to have, again, a strong evidence base before we start rolling out these technologies in these kinds of environments, right, without question. So I think that's one way in which civil society and also academia can play a significant role, right, in partnership with companies as well, right, because this is the only way that we can really understand when we're talking about such heavily privatized technology development. Right? I think in the context of harassment, it's a really important question. I talked about the fact that it's going to be more and more difficult for communities to stay anonymous online. We talk about anonymity as being a really important feature, right? particularly for communities in positions of vulnerability, right? And what that can do in terms of protecting communities against harassment. But if these are spaces, again, private spaces, public spaces that we're applying this technology to, what does that mean for communities in vulnerability? Again, the cybersecurity concerns, right? In the case of data breach or unauthorized access or misuse of the data, right? What can that mean for survivors of harassment who are trying to find safe spaces online, for ethnic, religious, cultural, linguistic minorities that are trying to find alternative spaces online, right? And again, these are questions that predate the metaverse, right? These are longstanding questions when we're talking about the internet, but they're persisting. And as Andrzej said, that they're becoming more and more important because they're consolidating, right? We really need to start addressing these questions, not just for the metaverse, but for the preceding technologies and what's going to come after, right? Your last question was on regulation, right, and what governments can do. I'm almost done. I think here what's really important is thinking about, again, frankly, the pace of the technology, right? And oftentimes, again, it's when we're talking about technologies like the metaverse, new and emerging technologies around artificial intelligence, we often securitize that idea, right? The idea that we're in an arms race with other countries, that if we don't develop it, someone else is going to develop it, and that we won't have the same safeguards or protections in place. But I think what government can do really well is actually trying to slow down the development so that we have time to have these discussions, so we have time to build this evidence base, right, whether we're talking about moratoriums, and to actually see if we need to have conversations around red lines. This is not something that companies in the private sector is very good at, frankly, right? Red lines can, we're often talking about how red lines can impede innovation, right? But again, when we're talking about the trade-off when it comes to our fundamental rights, sometimes we need to ask the question, right? Can we apply this to every context, or are there some environments that are just too sensitive for the threats that this technology can have, right? Even if there may be opportunities. And I think this is one place in which governments can play an important role, and we're already seeing that even in the EU with the AI Act and the discussions that we've been having, right? So I think that's really important. Again, I hope that I've answered all of the questions.
No, you've brought more questions that I think should be part of next year's agenda at GlobeSec. But that continue to challenge, right? I think the point of these conversations at the point of conferences is not just to, highlight the challenge and say, everything is terrible, run away, but also think about what are the new questions that we need to ask? What are the action items that we can take away when we walk away from this conversation? And how do we continue to drive forward, good democratic policies towards a more united world? And so with that, this question, I think it's perfect for Melissa. It's talking about, given the scale of data from usage of metaverse, surveillance would also need an unprecedented amount of processing capacity and technological sophistication. Do you think that because of the surveillance in metaverse would be limited only to very small number of technological capable states? So I think it's talking about the imperative of, are we in danger of having a bipolar world when it comes to the metaverse?
I think, actually, that's a great question, because I was thinking about it as Mehwish was talking, that there's already a dichotomy of the metaverse only applies to those who have high-speed connectivity and good computing, that's the northern hemisphere and not necessarily the southern hemisphere, and it's Western Europe, not necessarily as much as Eastern and Southern Europe, if you were to just localize it. And so you've already created a community that can participate versus those communities that cannot. Is it limited to a technologically advanced country? It's going to be limited, based on connectivity, high speed, 5G, 6G, whatever the next generation telecom network it is, at low latency, high speed data communications. It's going to be limited or enhanced by who has the compute facility near wherever the data is. And as you know, that's a cost limiting factor, right? It's power, space, and cooling. So if you're near power, like water, and you've got high speed compute at a lower energy cost, that's usually cost effective, and that plays to certain countries. But as I was thinking through it, another thought about where this is going is an analogy to the regulation that maybe Mehwish or others can speak to is our governments right now are starting to pass laws on children, minorities, however defined minority. Every country defines it different. It's under 16 for South America, it's under 15 and 13 for certain countries. But they're actually passing laws on how many hours you're allowed to be on online gaming. And because there's a disconnect of children with society because they're on this version of an augmented or a virtual reality because it's online gaming. And so there is a question about culture and society and your responsibility as human to human, why we come to fly from the United States to come to Slovakia. So I can actually be here in person and actually get to know you and smell the air and taste the food and grip your hand and know if you're really cold or if you're really hot. And I build that connection of person to person. And there is a concern that you're no longer going to have that understanding, that cultural humanity, because the technology takes away some of those social interactions that are so fundamental to society.
Jakub, as we think about this, what steps? Melissa does bring a great point. How do we continue to ensure that that the human-to-human connection is not lost, even as we are more connected? But it's how do we ensure that there is equal benefit and equal opportunity for folks to have access to the metaverse? Are you already thinking about that? And then the second is on interoperability. How are you working across the field to ensure that the metaverse is a full metaverse and not just one world, one world, one world?
About the connection and the fact that technologies will kind of make our connections of smaller value. I'm sorry to say, but I guess that there were people saying exactly the same at the beginning of the radio area. There were people saying exactly the same at the beginning of the TV area. We will all be watching TVs and we will stop communicating with each other. Beginning of the internet, and now is the metaverse. And of course, nothing will replace human beings being together. Nothing. And I think that no one wants to pretend.
We don't know. I hope yes.
Okay, fine.
I will give you a good example. I hope yes.
Okay, he's the geek of the group. But still, I guess for us human beings, if we cannot fly from Bratislava to the United States, well, I guess I prefer to being in a surrounding that gives me the feeling that we are close to each other, rather than need to write SMSs to you. But of course, there is a split to be done between what is real, and what gives you the impression of being real. About the kind of democratic aspect of the metaverse, of course, it is a challenge. We already see it with our devices that the price of these is dropping down. And this is a kind of a natural still trend in innovation, right? At the beginning, something is super expensive, and then as it goes, it is supposed to be less and less expensive. Will it always be a challenge? Yes, it will. But all in all, even though I guess the quality of the internet in kind of extremely remote areas may be not as good as it is in, I don't know, London or middle Bratislava, all in all, with time, it is of course a challenge both for companies but also for governments to bring this technology as far as possible. And the internet connectivity is one of the challenges that we miss, metaverse or not metaverse, by the way. But I wanted also to come back about this. At some point, you mentioned a point about how to build this metaverse based on democratic values. And I think this is a very, very interesting broader picture that we have to deal with. As when I have these kind of discussions, I sometimes have the feeling that we are the guys who don't see the challenges, no red lines, we don't give a damn, we go for it. And that's really not the case. Like, we want to discuss with everybody and try to build stuff in a reasonable way. And take the time to build stuff in a reasonable way. And discuss with civil society, with NGOs, with academics, with policymakers. And again, also because, maybe it's better to take more time now than we took for social media. But we really need to do it among people living in or let me put it differently. We need to do it among people still having access to a democratic and free internet. And this is where the real divide is happening today in the world. I mean, I think that it is already the case today, and it will go forward, fortunately, that we will have on the one hand Europe and the United States with one kind of internet, and on the other hand, a totally different internet driven by the Chinese. And this is a kind of helicopter view that I believe is super important in this debate.
Thank you, Jakob. Andrzej, I know I've put you on hold, but you can
Give
go.
me a question. Give me a question, because it's so many issues. But pick one.
Well, I think it's interesting. I do want to go back to Melissa on the idea of the when we think about adversarial powers having access to the metaverse, what challenges should we be looking ahead on? Andrzej, with you, I want to deep dive because I think you have a more positive outlook about the metaverse and the opportunities that it will bring in terms of more interconnectedness. And you're coming from Poland. I think you're the only person that is fully local in working on these issues that could speak to perhaps how much innovation.
Solution,
yeah, as a place of innovation, as a place where innovation is happening, where these conversations are advanced, what is the ground view? And then the adversarial threat. We've talked about it on disinformation over and over, but what challenges should we be looking at as we head into the metaverse when it comes to that? So I'll start with you, Melissa, and then I'll go with you, Andrzej. And again, if there are any questions, please raise your hand.
I thought you were starting with the positive and then go to
I don't want to leave it as a dun dun dun. So with that, Melissa, I'll kick it over to you first.
I think it's really, just as Mehwish has said, it's a surveillance platform. So there should be sensors to surveil the malicious activity on the platform, right? And there should be an alert kind of mechanism, and there has to be a whole content moderation aspect of it as well, that we really are just winging it in social media right now, of making the platform accountable, not thinking through what is harmful activity. And if you just even look at what TikTok's going through in the United States, is they've been demonized. I think that's unfair to demonize one platform. You should demonize all platforms and treat them all equal. And the TikTok is being demonized for basically because the content is actually leading to teen suicide. Well, I can only imagine a future where this is going to, again, put things on a rapid scaled path in the metaverse. So we need to be thinking about all the problems that are happening right now in social media and the challenges. Treat all platforms the same. I should be platform agnostic. Let's talk about what we want for the future. And it is a hyper-surveillance state. We have to think about that data protection and privacy and profiling. And profiling in particular, all around the world, regardless if you're a democracy, you get profiled, and you can, and then harm happens to you, however harm we define in our society. And so can we actually also put the sensors in there to alert us when there is malicious or harmful activity, and so at least we have some warning mechanism. Smoking is dangerous for your health, for example.
If I may just, and I know it's not the topic of the discussion today, but about social media and all sorts of harmful content, you kind of give the impression that it is the far west. Well, it's not. There is defined harmful content, there is defined illegal content, misinformation, disinformation. These are very different things that needs to be kind of differentiated, because the approach that one has to have to that is different, and we have very differentiated answers that are indeed kind of valuable with our community standards, with the way we approach illegal content, with the way we approach misinformation, hand in hand with fact checkers and so on and so forth. Disinformation hand in hand also with the NGOs, academics, and administrations with whom we work. But I really wouldn't like, and we'll jump back to the metaverse in a second, to give the impression that social media today is a far west and everything is possible. It's not the case.
Wonderful. Melissa, I don't know if would you like to respond to this?
I think that harmful information is a subjective point of view. Illegal information is defined by the law. Disinformation and misinformation is, in some ways, is political and, again, subjective. And most of the content moderation that's happening happens by geography, because all of our different laws and subjectivity. And so all platforms are not treating the same things, except for the illegal content, which is based on the law and the geography of which the information is being disseminated or posted. And so I think there's an important distinction there. And whether or not countries or companies are actually participating appropriately in society, many times the platform says, thank you, law enforcement, for the subpoena of the information, but I'm not headquartered here, so serve it through a multilateral legal process so that I get it in Redmond or wherever I'm at, and then I will think about giving you the information that's happening that causes harm in society.
So with that in mind, thank you, Melissa, for that, and thank you, Jakub. I think it's the international structure of regulation that we need to be looking at when it comes to the metaverse. Because if geography has been a challenge and we've been trying to figure out because of where it's coming from, because definitions on what is harmful and what is illegal have also stalled some of the conversation. What is Meta's approach outside of working through the EU, outside of thinking through what is the approach of thinking more globally about an international regulatory structure that can help?
Well, I'm based in Europe, and I think it's now fairly acknowledged that the European Union is a kind of driving factor of digital regulations all over the world. Like the first example was the GDPR and privacy that is kind of admired elsewhere in the world. Now we have DSA, we have DMA. So I do believe that indeed this kind of level, geographical level, and also level of expertise that we have in Europe is, to answer your question, the right way to kind of start a reflection on the metaverse.
I think that's a question we'll definitely have to pick up on in the next conversation. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Andrzej, and then I will go around and just give one sentence to each to close it out. Andrzej.
So only one sentence?
No, on the positive, on the opportunities, right?
So
we
listen,
talked about the challenges.
Yeah, I think that we sometimes look too big on the metaverse vision, because just look at what we have. Like, we have a beautiful technology in our smartphones, and we almost forget how it's sophisticated, because for us it's not technology. Yeah. It's like it's our life. It's like that we are used to do it. Okay, so we right now look at 2D content and scrolling through the internet. With Metaverse, we can break the glass and be present in the digital content. It's good or bad? Okay, then, so if I can meet each other through the internet connection through video calls, it's perfect. I can see each other with a person. If someone shut the camera, it's a pity, but it's like, if we can see each other, it's perfect. Okay, so what's wrong if we switch from Zooms and Teams to communicate as avatars in three-dimensional space, and we feel present in the same space?
Exactly.
Not maybe in the same way like in the real life, yeah, but it's close. It will be better than see each other through the glass, yes? Okay. Do we have regulation at Zoom? What we should able to tell through the Zoom or Teams or not? The metaverse is the same. If we use it as a communication tool, our behavior and our responsibility for our behavior will influence the way of our conversation. So sometimes we forget how this technology is close to us, because even if you said that there's a problem with internet connection, you can use it still metaverse without internet connection. Because you can download app at the VR glasses, you can use it in education. And if you use a program, as Jacob said, like you can see the Earth from the space as a NASA astronaut do. It's perfect, yes? You can move through the time and see, like, visit a Jurassic Park and see dinosaurs with our own eyes. How cool is this? You can be an Iron Man. Yeah? You can sit in the front row on the NBA games as a VIP. And the best part, you can share this experience with your friends, or not. And these examples are already existing, and you can use it every day if you have VR headsets. And if you take this power of visibility, visualization, and add it to schools, how cool education will look like when you can feel the presence of a digital content, how emotional it will be. to ask students to be in this space. And in that particular case, the space of the metaverse will be a concrete classroom. And the metaverse, what will shape the emotion or what we will say in this classroom, it will rely on the pupil in this concrete metaverse. So if you can look that in like a huge concept of the metaverse, yeah, you will have all kind of issues because we already have it in the internet. You know, it's like the same. But if you can just think about it as an app, you can download on the VR headset, on the mixed reality headset, and you can control all the program because it's a computer program. You will see more possibilities than, you know, than threats. You know, because it's still be controlled by, you know, owner of the app.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrzej. With that, I know time's up, but one sentence, metaverse, key takeaway, Mehwish, and then we'll go around and wrap it up.
Sure. Well, I think when we're talking about metaverse, we've talked about a lot of other technologies in the context of this conversation as well. And the metaverse itself is a collection of technologies, right? So I think if we zoom out, again, from a human rights perspective, it's, you know, when we're talking about these issues, it's not as though we're talking about something completely different that we haven't addressed before, right? It's same song, different verse.
Yeah.
Exactly. The questions really end up being the same.
Brief. Thank you so much, Mehwish. Melissa.
I think it'll be important to think about freedom of speech and what are the freedoms that we hold dear and what will be potentially challenged in going forward with the technology.
Lovely. Thank you, Melissa.
So I wanted to double down on the opportunities, but Andrzej did it already much better than I would do. So really, I would insist on this kind of need of ecosystem cooperation. And when I say ecosystem, it's really not about tech companies only. It's also about, again, NGOs, academics, whomever, to just get it right.
Okay, so on the enterprise level,
one
very short. On enterprise level, we already use VR and AR technology for employees' journal and product journal. So my statement by the end is that's already happening. The company is already benefiting from this technology itself. Yeah. So please follow.
Lovely. Thank you, Andrzej. And so with that, thank you so much to our panelists for the wonderful discussion. The wonderful GloveStick organizers have asked me to say that we will have a short coffee break and we will continue here in 15 minutes with a discussion on technology to the rescue. But before we get to that, a hand for our panelists for this wonderful discussion.